by making mistakes. We only learn by making mistakes. We only learn by making mistakes.
Well, but what if your feeling's like, I want to kill some kittens today?
If you get away with it and you don't have any regret, then you learn that's who you are.
Hello and welcome to the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Baumeister, and with me today is my good buddy, Jim Martin, from right here in the steel city of Stuttgart. So, Jim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You call it the Steel City. I sometimes call it Motown because, like Detroit, this is where a lot of cars are made.
Yes. Well, I think because I lived in Pittsburgh beforehand, and so in the U.S., and so moving to Stuttgart, right from Pittsburgh, which is known as the steel city in the U.S., has the steel industry, but also this kind of gritty industrial legacy. Stuttgart is kind of like that in a way, even though I think it's it's maybe left that legacy behind a little bit more than Pittsburgh has.
For you, does it have the same feel to it?
Well, I mean, the public transit here is a lot better than in Pittsburgh. I'll tell you that. So they're both these car cities. Pittsburgh's public transit is like if Stuttgart had never had proper public transit, but just as many cars and stuff. And what brought you to Stuttgart? I mean, people might be able to hear in your voice that you're a Yankee like me or an American. Why are you here?
Don't call me a Yankee. I lived in Richmond too long to be called a Yankee.
Even prior to moving to Germany, you had some background or connection with the German language. Is that right?
Yes, I started learning German when I was in 8th grade back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. I was going to a military school as well. It was a boarding school in Indiana, Culver Academy, where my father was the school minister. And my sisters went there as well. It was a private school with uniforms for the girls, and it was a marching military school for the boys. In the summer, the girls marched as well. It has an incredible summer school.
Mm-hmm. What was if I can ask, what was like your view at the time of the military aspect of the military academy? Because me knowing you now in Stuttgart and such, like I don't associate you with militarism per se, or like I don't have anything wrong with having a military background or things, but it's like that doesn't seem like your character. Was that something about your formative time there that you connected with, or that you didn't connect with so much, or what's your view of that? How did that shape who you are?
Good. It didn't leave me untouched, unscathed. At the time, the choice was either go to the town school where I had gone for a couple of months when we moved there when I was in 7th grade, and the military school didn't start till 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And there I was thrown together with Hoosiers for the first time. I came there. My name was Jimmy. I spoke with a Southern accent, and within a week, my name was Jim. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say y'all anymore. I tried to get rid of my Southern accent, which is why I don't have one today, because it had absolutely no prestige there and no place in the cornfields of Indiana.
Okay.
So it was either stay there with I'll call them roughnecks, or go to the school where my father was in the administration and could and actually did take care of me the first times I was bullied in 8th grade. We marched with rifles, and I was a gun owner. My father was a gun collector. I walked around the neighborhood with a .222 rifle with a scope on it that had bullets this big, and I shot things with it.
Okay. But so did every child your age, right?
In a way. Well, first it was a BB gun, but a classmate that I walked around the neighborhood with reminded me of that a couple of years ago. I had forgotten, and what would it be like today?
Yes.
Anyway, since I moved to Germany in 1990, I haven't touched a gun, and I had some experiences with guns in the inner city apartment I was living in Richmond, where I had to defend myself against someone who was breaking into the apartment next to mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have many good things to say about guns or the Second Amendment or things like that. But that I moved to Germany to sort of reset and be able to become the person that I eventually became, because I don't think I could have done that in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Great. With that, like, sketch who you are, like, today. Like, how do you characterize that person that you are here? That you had to move here to become. Who is that person?
Well, luckily, I've decided that there isn't an answer to that question. Someone I respect very much, a professor that I got to know in Freiburg, where I originally moved to, said to me, Jim, that's the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, who am I? And I've been trying to answer it since then, until just a couple of weeks or months ago, when I finally realized through journaling, writing my morning pages, that it's an impossible, for me, I think it's at this point an impossible question to answer. And luckily you're a philosophy professor and you might help me along the way. Maybe philosophy has some answers.
Yeah, former philosophy professor. So,
you're
don't want to overvalue my advice, but.
So who am I? I don't know, but I think my answer would be that I am whatever role I'm playing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes every 5 to 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 hours, I'm going to be a pianist. Sometimes I tell people I'm a composer. I'm a writer. I love beauty. I'm a father of 3 kids. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a brother. There are all these roles. Who am I? I'm Jim. The people who know me for certain things, and the people who don't know me, when I meet them, I'll tell you a story. I had I don't know if you want to hear this story.
Sure. Toss it in.
When I was studying in Freiburg, I had to take Latin, and I sat next to Isabel, and we got to be friends. She was also studying English, as I was, and long story short, I ended up becoming a correspondent with her mother, who was French, Marie Antoinette. She was French, and she was also had been an English teacher. And I got to know her through a creative writing workshop that I led and that she came to. Mm-hmm. And she wrote these wonderful stories about her life. And when she moved back to Nuremberg, we kept on writing, and we wrote for 20 years. And one time I was in Freiburg and I knew that she was going to be there. So I planned on meeting her at her daughter's apartment. And I hadn't had contact with her daughter since then. And in walk the daughter's parents-in-law and said, "Who are you?"
Mm-hmm. That's difficult to explain, right? Yeah. Did you say, "I'm the pen pal"?
Your daughter-in-law, law's mother. Yes. So, that was one of my roles, and it's very hard to explain sometimes.
Yes.
Who I am. Who are you, David?
Well, yeah. I mean, it is a good question. And I think maybe I like your response to it, the leaving it unsettled, that it's maybe inherently ambiguous. And yet there's nonetheless continuity. It's like, because as you describe, if it's really the case that that Jim like changes every 15 minutes, like how much of you changes or not, it's there's continuity with your habits and your relationships. I tend to think we kind of are defined by our relationships with others. So like I can vary a certain amount during my day, but then, having young children, I have to be at home at a certain hour, or I have to wake up to get the breakfast going. And like those relationships of dependence are there. And in a way that constrains me, because I can't, be somewhere else at 7 a.m. in the morning. but in another way, it defines who I am. Those sort of relationships. So, but that is a tricky one. I guess there's like some midpoint of
Yeah,
definition of the self.
but you didn't tell me who you were. You said you have to be somewhere at 7 a.m.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Well, I like that overlapping roles, father, son. That would be implied, but all, like creature. I like to think of myself as like an animal, a human animal. I was born and I'm living and I'll die in the future and probably about halfway along, and I got hair and skin. And there's certain things I like to eat and, I like to sleep. It's a good feeling to sleep. I like being warm when it's cold out and feeling cool when it's warm out. So those sort of things are also, I think, part maybe of most of us, or but to identify with them, I think maybe that's another step. But I don't know. Moving to Germany, I think because I know some other expats, and that question of who am I and identity is they usually have something to say about it, and I think it that's maybe something like you didn't mention American on your list, so or German. I think you have citizenship if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, I was just going to say I still feel like I'm American. I speak German very well, but I also consider myself an American. A lot of people here define themselves by what they've studied. I'm an engineer, or I am a teacher or something.
Mm-hmm. It's very like profession based.
Exactly. I've been a teacher. I've been an editor at an educational publishing company for 23 years now. So a lot of people know me as an editor. I've also written a dozen books. So it's hard to say. I'm a cook. When I'm cooking, I'm a cook. I like doing things with conviction. I'm directing a musical now that I helped compose and write. And, I'm helping organize it. I took the pictures of the cast. I'm also a photographer, but I'm not a photographer at this minute.
Yeah. It's like you can kind of pull out these different identities based on different contexts, but they're kind of present within you. But nonetheless, each of those are things that you've learned at a certain point, right? Like it's not like, or is your view that like each individual is kind of infinite? Like right now, I'm not an astrophysicist or like a mer creature living under the sea. But 10 minutes from now, I might become one of those. So it's like there's like limits to what we can become. But nonetheless, like you build up these possibilities within yourself.
I definitely agree with what you just said, that people have infinite possibilities. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book about creativity where I found out just that we all do have infinite possibilities. Many people don't realize that. Many people deny it that I've talked to. And maybe some people don't have these infinite possibilities.
That's like a question of human nature, right? Like how is it universal? It seems like some people voluntarily close it down and just prefer to think I am who I am, and it's as simple as that. And that I think in many cases, I think that can work. That's like a fine identity, or that can be a comfortable place for a lot of people. But I personally have found that difficult at times, and I think at the very least we should make space for maybe it's like neurodiversity. Maybe there are some of us who are more open to that. I know like one of my favorite quotes from Leaves of Grass from Walt Whitman that it's like, do I contradict myself? So be it. I contain multitudes. Something to that effect. The sense of like it's okay, and maybe that's also connected to creativity, as you mentioned. And for Whitman, it's poetry, and you can think, maybe there's something there. I think it also for philosophy or inquiry is important. But the sense that it's okay to have different routes that you could go down and different versions of yourself, I suppose.
Yeah.
And in the case when you're an expat, I guess that's maybe it just becomes very acute. Especially like right now, there's so much going on in the U.S. politically and socially and technologically and everything. So, and just, you know, I've following these things relatively closely, but from here in Germany, it's always this sense of like a double identity or this split sense of, you know, like you're there and you're here. But I don't know. It's not for everybody, but that having the multiplicity of self can be productive. And I think it makes sense for us to make space for that.
I enjoy working with people. The musical group I'm working with now is fantastic. I can't describe it. It's blissful. It's incredible. The people are wonderful. It's better than I expected, and probably more than I
more than you deserve.
You deserve. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about that project then. So this is your musical. This is the musical that you're collaborating with a group of others on. Like, exactly. What's it called? Sketch it out for us, and where are you guys in the process?
It's in German. It's called Die Stumme Symphonie, the Silent Symphony.
So der Stumme Symphonie.
Die Stumme Symphonie, yeah, which is about a parallel universe where the society, everyone's happy, they have enough to eat, they have work, but they don't have the freedom to express themselves through music. They aren't allowed to. If you're caught singing outside, then you're thrown in jail. So, and that happened to one of the young people in this group of friends, and they didn't like that at all. So they decided to protest and sing in public. And so there are a couple of love stories, and there's sabotage and break-ins and lots of music. And so I ended up writing some of the music, and it's amazing to produce something for something to come out of you, and then people are dancing and singing to it. You know, they're trying to figure out my words. And the thing I really wanted to study when I came to Germany 35 years ago was the relationship between words and music. I literally, because Gustav Mahler also wrote wonderful songs, and 3 of his symphonies have songs in them, this word element, 4 of them, 5 of them, goodness.
Yeah, the majority.
Yeah, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, Das Lied von der Erde, and the 8th. Yeah, 5 of them. I hadn't realized that. Anyway, and so I wanted to know, you know, did Schubert start with the words? Well, I knew he did, and then he wrote the music to it. But can you also start with the music and add words to it, which I tried in a very dilettantish way years ago. And now I wrote the texts in German, and they should have a certain rhythm and rhyme and tell the story. I mean, it was not easy, but it was a lot of fun. It was, it was a puzzle. And then after I had the words, then I put the music to it, which was easy because I've been improvising on the piano for a couple of years. And so that came easy to me. The last song I finished for this, I worked on from October until Easter, and wrote about 10 different versions of it.
So that one really had to marinate, you know, and kind of the sauce be remixed a couple times.
I threw out the meat and the marinade and wrote it all again. I spent Easter Sunday writing the 9th version, and I thought, okay, and then I wrote into the group, okay, I finished it. And then Easter Monday, I went for a walk with the text and with the lyrics and a pen and just started scratching out verses that didn't need to be in there. I wrote the whole thing over again, and my goal was to get it done by midnight. In 5 minutes to midnight, I was done. Turned it in, and the wonderful music director sort of ironed it out, made it more approachable and probably better. And so it finally got done, but that was a little bit late because the performances are in July, and it's a duet. It's a very dramatic duet with a choir of prisoners in the background, and so our choreographer, our wonderful choreographer, gets to work with that, and then they have to learn the song, and the band has to learn the song. So that was the last thing that got done, but it finally got done.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it came together. And it's interesting to like hear the process laid out there, almost like step by step, and like how one thing led to another. And it's like a chain of collective productivity and artistic creativity with one another. And like, and say a little bit more about so I guess like the concept and the setting. Like, would you say it's dystopian? It seems that way. And in a way, was that there present then in the writing, and then that gets expanded out on these other levels? Or was that more, this, because it, like picturing it visually. And I guess also I'm wondering, like, does it have a historical setting? I mean, doing this in Germany, I mean, it seems like, is this a totalitarian regime? Is this like the Nazi times? Or how extreme are we getting? Or is it more like a Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale type of space? Like what are the punishments? Is there a due process for the prisoners? All these things, like the world building of, also I love Kafka, it seems kind of like these arbitrary arrests or things, and like arbitrary rules, and like what's kind of in that for you and for your team?
Whether it's a dystopia or utopia, we don't know. I went to a military school. I taught at a military school. Everyone had a uniform. In the musical, everyone wears gray, and everyone's feeling just good. Diabetes is down 85%. They take their pills, and everyone's doing just fine. So it's not Margaret Atwood. The original story was written by the music director and two of the main characters. I came on board, and they had a couple of scenes that they weren't sure how they would work. And I think my stage experience, I just had a vision of, oh yeah, it's got to be like this. They were at my house in my living room, and I just improvised this first scene, and they wrote it down. Yeah, that sounds good. And with the first music I wrote for the second scene, I also just knew what they turned out completely different. But from what was in the script at that time, I could visualize where they were on stage and how they would be singing. And then I just started improvising, and that became the Song of the Gray People. Song des Grauens, which means of the gray people, but also of this Grauen of the terrible times or something.
Yeah, kind of the more figuratively gray. Nice.
Yeah. So the content of the music, or the message, I think, is about freedom of expression and being able to express yourself freely. Yeah. And they're beautiful love songs. My God. Oh, they are so beautiful. Oh my God! Just thinking about that, I get teary-eyed. When we had, oh God, in January we spent a weekend together and did the run through on Sunday afternoon, just of the first act. The first act was pretty much finished. everyone was so concentrated, so interested, so talented, so there, so caring about what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
Just,
well, if that's not a ringing endorsement of the,
I just broke down in tears and said, "This is what I want to do." And then then they did the second act, and the songs there. Oh man, bring your Kleenexes, because there's not going to be a dry eye. Yeah, and it's entertaining. My father sang in Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, and so I grew up with Gilbert and Sullivan, which has a lot of sort of slapstick humor in it, and so I've worked that into the scenes that I was responsible for, and
like kind of like a crowd pleasing element, that because people often with these musicals, you can follow them at different levels, and some are like really invested in the characters and their perspectives, and some more on the music, and then some might just be kind of like passively, like they're along for the ride. And so it's good to be able to offer something for all the viewer personalities, I suppose.
Well put. Yeah, I mean, and a musical does offer it all. We've got a brilliant choreographer who's choreographing for the first time. She's danced all her life. But Josefa Diaz, a colleague of mine, and she loves the work, and you can tell that she loves what she's doing. And we've got some great singers, and people are learning to dance and learning to sing while they're doing it. They aren't all dancers and singers, and singing and dancing at the same time. I couldn't do it. I don't have to. But where I feel most at home is directing, because I love literature, and I feel directing is interpreting literature. The script is there, and even the parts I didn't write, I see that you can make it work on stage by doing certain things, and I think I'm pretty good at discovering that. Just 2 nights ago, we had a rehearsal with a group scene that we've been rehearsing it for 6 months. Yeah. But it really seemed to finally come together and make sense to everyone, or a little bit more. Maybe we'll go another couple of levels in the next 6 weeks before the performance, but it's still coming together, still a whole lot of fun.
Wonderful. And so where can people go to see it, and when, and where can they get tickets? I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But
we can put a link there. It's premiering July 17th, and there are other performances the 18th, 19th, and 20th. So there will be 4 performances at the Altes Feuerwehrhaus, the old fire station in Stuttgart Süd. So come see it. Yeah, we've already sold a bunch of tickets, but
tickets are still available as of recording, at least.
They're still available.
That's a good point for us to, I think, take a little break. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Jim Martin.
Okay.
So Jim, how are you doing? Do you have a restful break?
A wonderful restful break. I slept 30 winks and listened to 4 recordings of Mahler's Second Symphony, and read 2 novels by Virginia Woolf, and wrote 4 more books.
Very good. Well, you made productive use of your time. That makes me. I got partially solved a Rubik's Cube, but I think maybe only like 5% there. So I feel like you had a more productive break than I. So all right. Here, so we've heard about the musical, and we've heard about some of your creative projects, and we've heard about your moving to Germany, and your childhood upbringing. And so let me, you've led a life, you know what I mean? You've led a life, and you're leading a life. Let me then ask you about death, because I've been asked a lot of my guests about this. So or it doesn't have to be put in those terms, but just like, how do you feel about the journey of life, being where you are? And, like you're a little bit older than I am, or at least, your children are older than mine. And like, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think about that? Do you see yourself like at a certain point along life's journey? Does the end of the journey at some point in the future factor into how you live your life now, or not? And yeah, just whatever thoughts you have to share on that, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, good questions. Mortality. We are all mortal, and it is funny and sort of charming that teenagers, and young people until they're 40 don't know that, or don't realize that, and that's good, because then they do all sorts of crazy things and experiment and try out everything that they should. That's why youth is wasted on the young. But I think what has helped me there is reading a lot of Joseph Campbell.
Like what, the Hero of a Thousand Faces, or the
Hero of a Thousand Faces, and just what he says. This is one of my absolute favorite books. It brings a lot of his teachings together, but luckily you can watch his interviews, his 6-part interview with Bill Moyers on about myths of man on YouTube, and you can watch his videos and listen to his podcasts. And he has helped me put my life into perspective, as well as Alan Watts. The two of them were good friends. Alan Watts was a photographer, philosopher, who brought Eastern religion to the United States in the 60s and 70s.
Yes. Yeah, and who also left a lot of interviews and recordings and archival just information and such. So it's a great person to, I think, I haven't done that as much personally with Campbell, but I've definitely listened through a lot of Watts and podcast form and other things. And I think it's really cool to study figures from that period, I guess, going forward, because you get to hear them in their own voice and see their own mannerisms. And that's part of their thinking. It's like I study Kant, or it's like the philosopher in history that I've spent the most time with reading and things, that we have some descriptions of how they were in their real life, but there's never going to be like a film of Kant, or a live interview of how their voice and the cadence and all those sort of things. So it is interesting. But say more about then, okay, with Watts or Campbell, how did they help you set your life and your views on life and death and mortality into a certain order? And like, you mentioned that, it's interesting how the young, perhaps people 40 and under, don't often raise this question. But I think sometimes that is the case with the midlife crisis, characteristically, if that's defined as around 40, and 40 has this almost social cultural significance, in the US and in Germany, and I think in many parts of the world. And then that maybe like people do start reflecting on it. So does that imply that you yourself weren't always so sanguine about it, but then you've become, better adapted now? Or how have those Campbell and Watts kind of changed you on your journey, and with regards to reconciling yourself with your own death?
Well, I think the most important thing is that both of them knew a lot about Eastern religion and philosophy. And the main takeaway from their teachings that has helped me personally is that in the West, we see ourselves as separate from nature, which is why many Western industrialized countries are destroying it. And in the East, they don't see themselves as separate from nature. They are, it's all part of a cycle. And I totally accept that point of view. And I mean, I'm going to leave a legacy of books I've written and books I've read, and music I've made, but that's okay. I'm totally fine with the life I've lived. Thank you for realizing and saying, yes, I have lived a life. I have lived a life. I've done, and I do. I'm able to do what I want to do. It's been a blessing, and so that's also why it's sort of hard to define myself, because a lot of people just won't be able to understand that you can just do what you want to do. I mean,
Yes.
there's some give and take. I can't fly on vacation every week because I'm not a multimillionaire. I can't make, I can't spend money on those things. But with what I have, I do what I want, and I often think about how long am I going to live, and no, I'm not going to die that way. And I think, oh, how am I going to die? Oh, I don't want to drown or be asphyxiated. So those, I think about it probably as much as everyone else. But just yesterday, I finished reading a book about Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize physicist, who was a real character.
Not very fine mannered, despite their name, right? Yeah.
This is one of my favorite books. Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which is also a collection of anecdotes about him, and also some transcripts of his lectures. And he was also, he was a physicist, but he also was a magician. He was a safecracker. He was a world-class bongo player, drummer. He learned to paint and did exhibitions. And just yesterday, I finished the second book. The last chapter is called Dying. He had cancer 4 times, and he knew he was dying. He was in a coma at the end, and his daughter and wife came in, and at one point he lifted his arm as if to show there's nothing up my sleeve. That's how the daughter interpreted it. And the second time he came out of the coma long enough to say, this dying bit is really boring. And I thought, yeah, he lived a life, and dying is probably, if you're in a coma, if it drags out, it's probably really boring. I don't want to die soon. I don't want to die in a car accident, because I think it would sort of crack up the people who are close to me. On the other hand, a slow farewell, as my father had, who had Alzheimer's, it was a very slow goodbye, is also not nice. So, yeah.
There's some sort of happy middle balance to be struck, I suppose.
Happy middle about death. I think we have to live every day. I mean, if COVID didn't teach us anything, it should have taught us that we have to, or we should, or we can enjoy what we have, because it might be taken away from us. Like our freedom to go outside. We had a curfew here in Stuttgart. Stuttgart was worse, I think, than any place in Germany. You couldn't go outside after 8:00 in the evening. That's where I bloom. I go to concerts at 8:00 every night. I mean, very often. And so not being able to go outside was tough on me. And it's not like I'm trying to make up for it now, but I appreciate it more when I'm at a concert. Oh, wow, this is great.
Yeah. I think I've talked about that with some people, and that phenomenon, this like kind of like post-COVID, like social euphoria in a certain way. It's kind of like, and maybe, but also just introducing a sense of gratitude. And I like how you emphasize appreciation and the perspective that it brings. And one other thing before I forget, like on just to connect with the Eastern philosophy stuff, and like I've talked with a couple guests on this pod about East-West philosophy and Taoism and Buddhism, and I also like that sense of just thinking that we can learn something from non-Western philosophical traditions that just speaks a sort of truth that maybe is lacking in Western traditions. Even if there's some places like in Aristotle, this sense of a natural kind of life done flourishing according to natural goals. And there are versions of this, or Stoicism has like ancient Stoicism, similar things with say like Zen Buddhism in terms of the, renunciation of suffering in a way, and kind of like connecting with the nothingness of existence, and that yourself is nothing, and the self is an illusion. There's like those sort of forms that of reconciling yourself with death. And maybe even like Socrates had that to a certain extent, who like didn't bother himself with his own dying and wasn't afraid of it or anything. But then there's this Taoist notion of life and death being like in a yin and yang and entailing one another. And it's like when you see right now it's late spring and there's like trees with flowers around still, and you appreciate the beauty of the flowers, but it would be ridiculous to say that like then when those flowers become leaves and then those leaves die and fall to the ground, that's that there's it's like they entail one another. You can't have the flowering without the falling down. So that kind of same principle of nature is that way, and then human life, all life and death are that way. And so I like those senses too. But what do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, if we stay with the flower for a second, Alan Watts would say there are no bees without flowers, and there are no flowers without bees.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
Western scientists would say, well, the flower needs the bee to pollinate it, but the Easterner would say they're all one, because
mm-hmm.
without one, the other one won't exist. So
mm-hmm.
they're the bee and the flower are yin and yang.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and it's like coevolution.
I discovered the Tao in high school, and
mm-hmm.
was very pleased to learn that it's okay to go with the flow, because I was someone who liked, that is also doing what feels good, what you want to do, going
mm-hmm.
with the flow. And that's what Tao is, going with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And
just right off the waterfall in a barrel, you just go with the flow. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like with I really love Taoism and like the Tao Te Ching. Or I found my original copy that a friend gave to me when I was like 18, and ever since then I've never studied it in terms of been like a scholar of the Tao Te Ching, but just have really enjoyed the poetry of it or the images of it. But it often does raise ethical questions often, because say you're confronted with a dilemma, like your friend is telling you that they robbed your other friend, and they are asking for help or something. Maybe that's a terrible example, but you have to make a decision, and it's kind of like a conflicted thing. It's not always apparent where the flow leads, and where like in some ways this feels like going with the flow, and then or that feels like going with the flow. And so if you admit sometimes, and I think moral conflicts are often that way, it's like often we can go with the flow through our lives, and I think it helps us to see like just go with the flow. Like, but
okay, yeah, but you just mentioned morals, which have nothing to do with what's inside you.
Okay. Well, I don't know. That depends on your morality, your concept of it. But
yeah, we'll have to do another chat another time about that. As far as I understand it, you would have to weigh who was more wrong to steal what from whom,
mm-hmm.
and going with the flow for me, and I'm going to get back to flow later as well.
Mm-hmm.
Going with the flow in that sense would be what do my feelings say?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if we go with the intellect, okay,
Yeah.
he stole something more valuable than that, so he's more wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally intellectual
Mm-hmm.
and out of the world. But if we're going to behave a certain way that is um, right for us, then we have to do it from our feelings. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
the head or the heart, and we have to always, as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
behave from the heart.
But then I agree, and I think that like we overemphasize rational thinking, and particularly when I mean I think certain types of decisions, like we want people to act rationally in courts of law, often are the decision making about what's permitted or not to unfold at that level. But when it comes to most of our lives, as when we make decisions, it's more like the heart ought to be trusted. But I guess my deeper question is, what if there's a conflict at the level of the heart? Because you speak as if the heart, it's clear what the heart believes. So another example, like let's say two friends invite you to go out, come to their house for dinner on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and you're free, and they both invite you at exactly the same time. The text arrives or what, and you know that either of them, you can only go to one, and who you don't go and see, well, their feelings will be hurt because you're not available, and you have to make a choice. And so there, it's like, and they're both equal. They're both just as good of friends. Like, let's presume you love them both equally, and there's no way to rationally settle that. So in that sense, it's like, how do you even resolve what is going with the flow? Is that it's almost like undecidable.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. And if you have to make a decision, then you go to one of them, and then you deal with the feelings of the other. But if you don't go with your feelings, in many situations, if you don't go with your feelings, something's going to come out. Something's going to go wrong. You're going to crash your car. If you're going to the wrong person's house, you're going to crash your car on the way there, and there's going to be a problem.
Okay.
That,
True. Like those feelings will if they're bottled up, they'll explode at some point.
They'll rectify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It might be an explosion, but things feel better when you're doing the right thing. And like I said, that's what I've learned these past 5 years. Yeah.
Well, what about this? And so I wouldn't follow up, except that I guess this is like a philosophy podcast, and I really dig this topic. But it's like, okay, so then how do you know whether the feelings you're having should be trusted or not? Because let me give you this example. So imagine somebody, that they feel, I just really feel like, throwing some bricks through some windows today. Like I love that feeling. It feels right to me. Or I don't know, there's any number of examples. Like I feel like it's this right thing to do. And that seems to justify, so long as somebody feels that something is right, then it's almost like they're permitted to do it. But it's almost like we'd want to be able to tell people, listen, you might feel like taking justice into your own hands or something. Like, people seek revenge on somebody else rather than calling the police, I guess. Or, a little bit of shoplifting or something. Oh, I'm not going to pay for this paper bag or something. I don't know. Like, cause it just feels like minor. But there are certain examples like that where we might want to say, okay, you might feel like doing that, but the right thing to do in that case is to set your feelings aside. And that's not even to say, if you admit that there's a diversity of human types, and there might be people who are like the criminally insane, that category is kind of taboo now, but just basically the sense that, do you see those balloons? I'm not sure what makes those appear, but maybe when I do this. So, but in any case, let's imagine if somebody, or with there are like illegal and socially taboo sexual fantasies that should be, but you might say there are some individuals who they feel that that's what they want to do, and I'm not to debate whether that's the case or whatnot, but socially it just seems there are certain cases where we want a mechanism where we'd want to say, no, don't trust your feelings in this case. And so how do you know if your feelings are legit or not?
Well, you would have to define legit. I would also say go with your feelings there, because then you'll learn what it's like to shoplift or what it's like to live out your fantasies. It's a way of getting to know yourself. By making mistakes, we only learn by making mistakes. We only learn by making mistakes.
Well, but what if your feelings like, I want to kill some kittens today? Or like,
if you get away with it and you don't have any regret, then you learn that's who you are. And there are people who kill kittens.
Or, okay, what about if your feeling is to go kill some other human beings? I mean, is there a limit?
Well, I'm also a big fan
You're like very affirmative, it's like you're very supportive, it's like live your truth. But is there like, I guess it's a question, are there moral limits on?
Of course there are. Of course there are. And being a big fan of Christopher Hitchens, who debated about religion the last 10, 20 years of his life, he would say that religion did not, it wasn't Moses who told people not to kill other people. It's just in 99% of human beings to know this knowledge, to know not that it's wrong to kill other people. If you don't know that, or feel that, or sense that, then society would say something's gone wrong with you, and that's why they lock people away, because they think that they're a danger to society, and they might be. Maybe they just wanted to kill one particular person because they were standing in their way of reaching their goals. They might get locked away anyway. That's a problem for the justice system. I'm not saying go do whatever you want. I hope you didn't understand.
No. Yeah.
But you have to. Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss, which means do the things that excite you. And my mother quoted Joseph Campbell for decades, and so I've heard this all my life: follow your bliss, and it's probably helped me. Although I know even before I ever heard her say that or knew what it might have meant, I was sort of a free spirit and doing my own thing, going my own way.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time speaking for other people and whether they want to kill kittens or people or do bad things. You learn from what you do.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting, because but then you do vote, right? Like I assume you probably vote and things. So it's like there's an example where nonetheless you have to make decisions. Like there's like a moral tolerance for others, and it's hard to say that what others should or should not do. But then there's certain times as like a member of the political community where you kind of voice your preference. This is what we should do, and you'd rather that we all do this than that, and that could be that this sort of thing should be illegal or should not be legal, or this direction in the government or that. And so the rubber does hit the road. So it's like, I think with murder, it's helpful as philosophically, and there's just like most philosophers in the history of ethics use, bring up murder just because it's so clear cut. But think about with like here in Stuttgart or something like jaywalking, like, like crossing this with just in Germany overall and Austria, in my experience, people, there's just a social acceptance or expectation that people should wait at the light until it's green to cross. But in many parts of the US and many other parts of the world, like in New York City, for instance, it's like a total disregard. And, it's not, police just overlook it. It's just kind of a part of life. And so that's the kind of example of then like the community, like every community around the world would not tolerate murder. Maybe that's like universal, but should the community tolerate jaywalking or not? Then it's almost harder to rely on like some universal feeling, because it just seems that there's just difference of opinion about that, maybe. So then, morality then also becomes contextually, geographically variable. And then it becomes difficult to say, well, we don't have slavery, but they're on the other part of the world, that they seem okay with that, so they should just be able to do it.
When you said every other society criminalizes murder, it reminds me of one of the last books I read. It was translated from Flemish into German. It's by the Flemish author who lives here in Stuttgart, Chaya Schoters, and it's called Trophy. Okay. And it's about a trophy hunter, an American who goes to Africa. We don't know where in Africa, it's just Africa. Mm-hmm. And he gets a lottery ticket to kill the last of the big five, a rhinoceros. He has a lottery ticket to be able to kill a rhinoceros. Mm-hmm. And when he gets there, about halfway through the novel, he hears about the big six.
Oh, humans.
Yes. And he gets to know the people in this tribe. They're the scouts that take him out. If he shoots one of them, then the tribe, I'm sort of spoiling it, but then the tribe gets money. The tribe gets money and can live. So it's sort of like Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery.
Yes.
Which is based not on economics, but superstition, that one person in the town has to be stoned to death every year so that the crops will be good. Mm-hmm. And in Trophy, there will be economic profit from the death of one person. It's a fascinating book, but when you see where it's headed, you just want to go, oh, no. But I think you'd like it.
But by that point, you're kind of caught in because it's like a compelling setting on all this. So then you're kind of invested in it.
You want to know who's going to get killed. I thought the trophy hunter was going to end up getting killed, and he almost does get eaten by hyenas, a pack of hyenas, but he escapes. It's sort of like T.C. Boyle's story, except there's only one place that the action takes place. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Let's transition then to our recommendation. Book, film, album, mix and match your choice. What do you got to share with us?
Yeah. I mentioned that Alan Watts and Joseph Campbell were very important to me because they brought the Eastern and the Western learnings together. Mm-hmm. And then there's a third area of learning that I found out about through, it is the most beautiful book I've ever read, by John O'Donohue, who was an Irish Catholic priest, and then he left the priesthood. He was a poet, a philosopher, and in this book...
And what's the title of the book, just for the audio?
Eternal Echoes, Exploring Our Hunger to Belong. Mm-hmm. He takes the learnings that he learned and taught as a Catholic priest, so the Christian body of thinking, and combines it with Irish or Celtic mysticism, that the landscape, the rocks on the landscape, have a certain aura, feel, magic, purpose to them. He brings that together in a poetic language, and there's also a wonderful, that I think is unsurpassed. There's a nice interview with him on the podcast with Krista Tippett called On Being. It's the most heard podcast of that podcast, which was done a year before he died. He died way too young, about 15 years ago. And you get you hear his Irish, wonderful Irish accent, and he talks enthusiastically about everything. But his writings are just wonderful. I've read the book. It was by my bed. It's, I sort of call these two my Bibles. I read them again and again and again. So
what do you got for us next?
But
I mean, it's hard to top that. That was a very, after with that recommendation, anything else is going to seem like,
anyone who knows me knows what my favorite, I have too many favorites, but Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf is the book that I've taught the most. I think I've taught it 7 or 8 times. When I first read it, I had put it on the summer reading list for Benedictine high school boys because I didn't know anything about literature. And my girlfriend at the time said, "Oh, have them read Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway." I thought, okay, Virginia, maybe she's even a Southern American writer. This course I was teaching was American literature.
And that, okay.
She's neither Southern nor American. And this is nothing for 11th grade boys, except that it does have a phallic symbol in it in Big Ben. And I was lucky enough to find a grandfather clock lying on the street on my way to work one day while I was teaching this. And I hauled it into the classroom. And so we had a phallic symbol in the classroom for the rest of that year. And so
that sounds effective.
I love it because there's so much in it. You can read it on so many different levels and enjoy it. When I found out that Cambridge University Press was going to be making an annotated edition of this, I wrote the woman, Anne Fernald, who teaches in New York, and said, "I know a lot about the book, and I'm an editor, and I'd like to help you edit the manuscript," which was a good thing because Cambridge University took 2 manuscripts that existed, the American and the British proofs, sent them to India, had them retyped in India, which added lots of mistakes like the and stuff. I mean,
okay.
Anyway, so I proofread it and actually added a couple of annotations or made her aware of a couple of things that I had found out. So there are a couple of annotations are mine, things that I found out while researching, which was
nice.
Fun. And I did that for the fun of it. That's
yes. Totally. Well, and just that reflects your living connection to the book, and that's cool to, like a new generation of readers, or at least, scholarly readers who I think the audience for Cambridge University Press, right? And so people who could really appreciate that information, like adding to the experience. I like that.
It's a great book to study. Yeah. The Great Gatsby is a great book to read and enjoy. This is a book like Ulysses. I guess you have to study it to appreciate it, I think.
Yeah. Totally.
So shall we move on to music recommendations?
Please. Yeah. Okay. You got to retract your Mahler second. Maybe you've recommended that so many times that let's just say that you do not recommend that here.
No. No, I do.
No, yeah, that'd be too hard. Okay.
But I'm going to start with, just one of the CDs that really had one of the biggest effects on me. Anyone who knows me knows I like Mahler, Mrs. Dalloway, and what's my email address? Genesis.gym. So Genesis. And there are, good Genesis records, CDs out there, the old stuff. But it wasn't until I went to see the Musical Box, which is a Canadian tribute band, played here in Stuttgart. And after the concert, during the concert was old men like me in 40-year-old Genesis concert T-shirts. And when the first note started, we all stood up for the whole concert. We stood up for the whole concert. because we had been waiting 40 years. They play the music and do the stage show exactly as it was in 1973.
Okay.
So in 2006 or 7, when I first heard it, I'd been waiting 40 years to experience this.
Damn.
And then I went down afterwards, and some of the people, were selling merchandise, and I saw that the keyboard player, David Myers, had arranged some of the songs for piano. And that's the reason I play piano today, is because in 1978, my mother gave me some Genesis sheet music.
Nice.
And
so that was really the genesis of your musical creativity, you might say.
Absolutely. I wanted to play these harmonies and melodies that the band did. And so I did that from 1978, so for 30 years I was playing Genesis on the piano. And then David, who has become a good friend, and hi, David, he's going to be watching this.
Nice. Yeah, hello. Another David's always welcome.
He's the other David in my life, David. And then he published the music and sent me the sheet music. And I learned the Firth of Fifth, and he came to visit me, and I played it for him.
Okay. Well,
and I had a wonderful piano teacher who said one of the most brilliant sentences I've ever heard in my life. Okay, Jim, enough Shostakovich. Now Genesis. So we would stop playing Shostakovich, and then I got to play Firth of Fifth for her, and she helped me prepare. And she was there the day she played, and then I played, and then he played the rest of the afternoon. A couple of other friends were there, and he's visited several times, and I just wrote him the other day. He's a musical director for musicals in Canada. Yeah. So he's, we've reconnected over that, but the cinema show, I mean, just hearing Genesis on the piano.
Yeah. Talk about bliss, right? Chasing your bliss.
This is the CD that I'll take. You can put in the casket with me, okay?
Okay. Nice. With little embedded speakers, so it's just playing on loop.
I can't top that. I'm going to stop right there. I was going to go into Bruckner and Mahler and Schubert and Goretzky and Copland, but I don't need to. If you want to, you can read my musical blog.
Yes.
I made an advent calendar one year with 24 of my favorite songs with little story or pieces of music with telling my story about how I got to know the piece. And I realized it's interesting. Every bit of music I like, hardly, I think without an exception, have to do with, I like them because I've experienced them with or through people. Genesis I first heard with my neighbors, the Hills, back in 1977, that summer, lying down on their living room rug with the lights out next to the big speakers, listening to this ba ba ba, and it goes on listening to Mahler for the first time with friends and experiencing wonderful performers. So I'm sort of a people person, and I like experiencing things with people. That's why I go to concerts, because I think, wow, all these people are listening to Schubert with me now.
Yes. There's something about that social connection. It's kind of indispensable, I suppose. Which is ironic saying that, it's like, here we are, we're recording this over Podcastle, and people will be hearing this on their device in audio form, or maybe watching on YouTube, but
maybe they'll reach out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's like, this is another form of sociality, perhaps. So it's nice to share stories, share emotions, and share these viewpoints. So Yeah. Well, then, yeah. With that, those were excellent recommendations. I'm gonna go stream some Genesis right after this. So yeah, and then I'll move on to Exodus and then Philippians or whatnot. So okay, dude. Jim, thanks so much for being here and for this wonderful wide ranging chat.
I thank you for inviting me. It was totally fun, and I'd do it in a heartbeat again.
All right. Cool. Well, we'll definitely have you back down the line. So, all right. Well, Jim, we'll see you soon, and everybody else, we'll see you for the next episode of the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast.
Take care. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation with
Jim Martin.
The Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast is a co-production of Deadbeat Media and the Museum Hegel-Haus, Stuttgart. For more Deadbeat content and to chip in to keep the channel going, check us out at deadbeatphilosophy.substack.com. For more about the Museum Hegel-Haus, check out hegelhaus.de. That's HEGEL-HAUS.de. Adios and auf Wiedersehen.